So the Case Western Reserve University and WWII, they are some of the leaders in having the HamSCI workshop go in more creative directions. And I really appreciate that because we can spend all day looking at Doppler shifts and, calculating all sorts of things about the atmosphere. But sometimes we need to embrace some of our creative side. And a few years ago, they started a book club, and you can see where it has ended up now, as Christina Collins has pointed out. So this is their third book club year, and so I would like to present Aaron Billow, W3WAM, Vice President of the Case Amateur Radio Club, WAEDU, to present this year's book club talk.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this weekend. My name is Aaron Billow, W3WAM. I'm the Vice President of the Case Amateur Radio Club, and to think we all started as a book group. Last year, the Air Dr. Professor Kazdan presented Romeo and Juliet and Semaphore, and so I'd like to thank him for last year's presentation as well as consultation on this year's book group. But this year, I have a bit of a different talk to give you. I've decided to take on the book All the Light We Cannot See, Anthony Doerr's 2014 prize-winning novel. Doerr was born in Cleveland, and he currently lives in Idaho, and I find that he has a lot of authorial influence on this novel, and I'll be going into that a little bit more. But the title, I think, is really interesting, especially for our craft. It stems from a cell phone conversation that he witnessed. The story goes in 2004, a person traveling on the train, they went underground going into New York City, and the cell phone stopped working because they were underground. And this man got really frustrated at his cell phone, had just gone silent. And Doerr thought this was really funny because all of this abstract magic, this light that we cannot see, powers this cell phone. Of course, it doesn't work in a tunnel, but we expect our technologies to work flawlessly all of the time. And so the title is meant to point out sort of that irony, especially as we saw it in 1945. So I'll start with a brief synopsis. I'd like to introduce you to the two characters that this book follows. Werner Pfennig is a German boy who's an orphan, grows up in the coal mining region of Germany, and is sent to military school for his very special aptitude in radio. And I'll get more into that in a bit. Marie-Laure LeBlanc is a blind teenager growing up in France during World War II. And the story will follow the convergence of these two characters over the Battle of St. Malo. And Doerr selected this town because when he was traveling Europe, he found that it was in pristine condition. It had been rebuilt. And he found that rebuilding after the battle was very impressive. Notably, the entire town was burnt down during the end of the war. So starting with Werner Pfennig, he's very naturally gifted in electronics, and he gets sent to military school because he fixes a local party member's Philco radio that it was for shortwave reception. At this military school, he learns a lot of triangulation techniques in order to effectively fox hunt for Russian partisans during the war. And towards the end of his schooling, in about 1944, he's sent to the front lines to fight for the Wehrmacht. Marie-Laure is like I said earlier, blind teenager growing up in wartime France. And Doerr wrote her this way because he was fascinated in the technicals of writing for a blind character. There's a thematic idea of these things that we cannot see, this science, and I think that her blindness can play into that, but specifically describing the world without a visual connection was very fascinating to him. She's the daughter of a locksmith for the Natural History Museum in Paris, and she flees to her granduncle's home in St. Malo. That is why she ends up in St. Malo. And she becomes part of the French resistance using her uncle's transmitter in his attic. They notably transmit the coordinates of German weapons as well as announcements to get word out there and keep information flowing during occupied wartime. So I'd like to take a brief sidetrack here, talk about solar cycle 17, notably happened during the war, where sunspot activity drove up the maximum usable frequency, which was really interesting because it meant a lot of, it really played into the war. Aircraft transmissions, like communications, were often heard before they appeared on radar, and it made intercepting signals very easy. Notably, there was a listening station in Winnipeg that was able to monitor both the European and the Pacific theater of the war. And radio strategy had to be constantly reevaluated. Between solar cycle as well as topography, this was a science that we didn't very well understand during the war, and it really had its impact on the war. Many of you may be familiar with the movie A Bridge Too Far about Operation Market Garden, and radio, or lack of understanding in radio rather, was a part of our failure in Operation Market Garden. We did not understand the propagation and the terrain and how terrain played into that. There's a lot of failures in Operation Market Garden, to be very clear, but our understanding of radio could have been one of them. We even created a new laboratory, the Inter-Service Radio Propagation Laboratory, to specifically study radio propagation. It's now defunct, but you may know part of it as the NTIA. I'd like to take also a brief moment to talk about the Nazi radio policy. Notably in the story, Werner smashes a childhood shortwave radio that he built, and because forward broadcasts were prohibited. Ownership of unauthorized receivers was punishable by death up until the end of the war. It was a notable propaganda policy of the Nazi regime that they saw to it that people could access radios that were specifically tuned to receive propaganda broadcasts. That was very important to be able to get that word out there. And Werner is taught to triangulate rogue transmissions. His group inadvertently kills a young girl because they mistake a pipe on the side of a house for an antenna. They were destined to do this to Marie Laur's household. Remember, the blind girl part of the resistance, because they have a rogue transmitter. They're transmitting news that was not authorized by the state. And throughout all this, we have a lens of sympathy for Werner, our character who we can all relate to being very gifted in the art of radio. And he's supposed to be a sympathetic character. We believe that he is, we understand him through the lens of our technology, not necessarily through the lens of someone who's using radio for the purposes of evil. I'd also like to talk, it's also a great lens to talk about radio in the French resistance. Our blind character, Marie Laure, would obtain codes and eventually personal bulletins. She would go to the bakery and receive these loaves of bread with code baked into them, the little piece of paper. Take them home and open the bread, and in there were codes to be spoken over the radio, transmitted at midnight, close to midnight. Her grand uncle was the one that would transmit these codes and bulletins. He had a transmitter in his attic, and he understood how to do this. He spent a lot of his times transmitting music over the air, transmitting scientific lessons towards children over the air, and so he understood the art of radio, but using it to be a part of military resistance was a very new idea to him. One thing that really saved this family was they had a retractable antenna. The antenna wasn't just always sticking up in the air, ready for the Wehrmacht to see. Unfortunately, though, the Wehrmacht was always listening, and they did hear these rogue transmissions and did eventually find the house. Our two characters converge during the Battle of St. Malo. Marie Laure is being chased by a so-called evil Nazi character, von Rumpel pictured here. And this is in contrast to our sympathetic German character. I'll save you some of the details, but to make a long story short, von Rumpel is looking for valuables, a diamond, whereas Werner is simply doing a job. Werner hears Etienne, the grand uncle, transmitting for the resistance, and then Marie Laure's transmission. And he keeps it a secret from his commanding officer. They could have very much found this house and taken out the threat and taken away the electronics, but he chose not to. Notably, Werner hears 20,000 leagues under the sea being transmitted while he is in a very, very dark cellar waiting out a bombing. Doerr, in a 2014 interview, said that, and I quote, "All I knew is that I wanted to have a blind girl reading a story over the radio to a boy." This story brings hope and peace in a time of war when Werner is stuck in a very dark cellar. It brings to light these themes of the equalization power of technology, the educative power of technology, how technology can comfort and all of the light that we cannot see. Werner becomes a sort of savior to Marie-Laure. He comes face to face with her, and you have this contrast of the able-bodied German saving the blind girl from an evil Nazi. In a lot of ways, it could be cliche, but Werner does it for very good reason. He recognizes the transmissions from his boyhood, notably the music and the educative materials. And even Marie-Laure recognizes that he saved her life 3 times over. I'll spare you a lot of the details because I do think the book is absolutely worth the read. There's a lot of themes and symbolism that I haven't covered. Loss and death. Marie-Laure's father is captured by the Nazi regime. Werner's relationship with his sister Jutta is rather lost throughout his time in the Wehrmacht. Marie-Laure's fascination with sea creatures, possibly connecting to the sea and waves just in general. There is a diamond that is a notable plot device within the novel. It is based on this diamond right here, the Delhi sapphire. There is a lot of puzzles and mysteries present within this book. Marie-Laure's father, who is a locksmith, creates a lot of puzzle boxes to hide things in, and there's themes of blindness and ignorance, maybe propaganda, the lack of understanding of information. But I chose to focus largely on radio for this talk. And so where does this all leave us? I want you to consider your role as a radio operator, as a radio scientist. Are you a Werner when possible? A lot of us are recruited for military uses of our technical abilities, myself included. Are you thinking critically about the way that you're applying your skills and your technology? Balancing your golden ticket to get out of an orphanage versus your morals and what you have to do to obtain that golden ticket. Are you a Marie-Laure? Would you be a member of the French resistance if given an opportunity? I mean, even Marie-Laure was threatened for her involvement. That's not an easy decision to make. And where will your curiosity lead to? And above all else, the free flow of information is incredibly important. This group knows that more than anyone else. We're communications hobbyists. Listen to radios. Let information flow out of you and into you. But the key takeaway that I want you to think about is the girl reading a story to a boy over the radio. It boils this 500-page novel down to just one sentence. It's really easy to get lost in the sauce here. We're all talking about space weather and physics, and all of that is wonderful stuff. That's why we're here. That's why we love to talk about it. But I encourage you to really think and keep in mind why we do this. It's to connect, it is to educate, and it's to comfort. In my own radio club, we've sometimes strayed away from that connection aspect. And that's not all bad, right? We learn a lot of things. We've done lots of cool projects, but at the end of the day, this hobby is designed to have people talking to each other. Community is incredibly important, and I really do believe that this group holds the tools to do it. So please be the girl or the boy, blind or ignorant, talk or listen. Thank you kindly. My contact information is here if you'd like to discuss further.
Lots of time. Thanks, Aaron. That was really wonderful. And I think it does really help speak to the community that we're trying to be, the goals we're trying to reach. And it really does help us to take a step back and think about why we're doing what we're doing and where we want all this to go. So I encourage, we've got some more time for questions and discussion. So
I'll ask one. What do you think about the movie?
I have not seen the movie. I base this completely off of the book. You'll see a lot of these pictures are from the Netflix adaptation, but I have not seen the movie. I plan to watch it on my way home.
I was busting your chops when you said talk because, in my opinion, the proper term is communicate.
Okay.
It's not always about talking. It's sometimes about typing.
That is fair.
So with all the interest and concerns about artificial intelligence these days, what do you think the next idea for an author to write a book about would be when it comes to the obfuscation of communication and reality?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room to have a conversation about truth. We have a lot of themes of propaganda. There's a lot of novels written about the obfuscation of truth, notably 1984, thinking about how we treat facts, right? But that's been from a mean-spirited institutional perspective. I think there's a lot of room to talk about that from a robot that doesn't really know any better and is making things up.
Aaron, thank you for all that and congratulations. I want to put in a shout out to an old friend. It's Hi Bob, if you're listening to this. Bob Morgan, K8RBV, as he used to put it, radio's greatest virtue, was my 6th grade English teacher. He's not the one who got me started at amateur radio, but we have been ham radio buddies ever since. And about 15 years later, after I was in his very first class, Anthony Doerr was. And I don't think Doerr went on to become an amateur, but I'm sure Bob and he talked about it over the years. So, hi Bob Morgan, and I hope all is well for you. But thank you very much.
Hi, great talk. I've seen a number of things where you see a number of people kind of take the wrong lessons from a lot of these sci-fi novels. Generally people who have more money than sense, where they go, I want to do this thing, and it turns out they want to make a dystopia. How do you gently kind of push people like, hey, that's not the point?
Yeah, I mean, media literacy is incredibly important. You can't force people to take the correct message. You can teach them how to read it, and it's really easy to get caught up in like these sci-fi worlds of, wow, that would be great if we had this wonderful technology. But unfortunately, sometimes we just need a heavier hand to tell people what to think.
And I just want to compliment the organizers of the HamSCI meetings. Almost every meeting has a topic which makes us think about stuff besides the topic that's generally at hand.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.